Good afternoon and good afternoon. Welcome back to another edition of the Dr. James Show. I am Dr. James Smith Jr., and I'm thrilled to be back with you. And actually, I'm still tired. Last week, Thanksgiving, Friday, our daughter got married, super emotional experience, but we're back. I'm still recuperating physically and emotionally. Yes, it was a tissue issue evening. But we're here and we're looking forward to another informational and transformational show. Don't forget, during the course of our program today, please feel free, comments in the chat room or questions in the chat room, and we'll make sure that you're a part of this experience as well. Our guest today, Crystal Washington. She's a technology strategist. She's a certified futurist. She is an author. She is an international speaker. She's the bomb. And that's very 70-ish, but she's awesome. I can't wait to bring her out. Before we do, let's take a look at a little clip of Crystal Washington in action.
And so that's why we're focusing on technology today. Because the fact of the matter is you have grown your business by developing trust and confidence with your clients. And so I want to show you how to take what you already do in the real world and apply it online.
Now is the time for us to polish up our profiles because tomorrow is not guaranteed.
How many of you are on LinkedIn regularly, meaning at least once a week? Okay, about half of you, not bad. Okay. How many of you are on Facebook? Keep your hand up if it's Facebook for business only. Okay. Anybody on Twitter? I think there's only, oh wow, okay. That's fascinating. Twitter confuses people. And I think the reason Twitter confuses people is because they're often following other confused people. I'm a futurist, so I'm used to looking at things 5, 10 years into the future. We have been mating with our devices for the past 20 years. Not that definition of mating. Being fixed with, being merged with. So the first thing I want to pose to you is technology is changing humans. Humans are developing something called digital amnesia. All that means is that we're retaining less information because we have devices that will remember things for us.
Powerful. I want more. Crystal Washington, welcome to the Dr. James Show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
How does it feel watching yourself like that? I know I don't like it, but that was awesome.
It's never not weird.
Wow, it's great stuff. And it's great to have you. What a treat this is going to be. As a matter of fact, when I met you the first time, it was a few years ago. We were at a conference and you were a part of a panel, 3 other people. I saw one person. I saw Crystal Washington. You crushed it. And I said, I have to get to know her. She's special. And you are. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dr. James.
You talked about technology is changing us. Mm-hmm. How so?
Well, I think oftentimes we think of the technology we're developing, right? So we're always thinking about how humans are shifting things. But this technology is also having an effect on us as well. It's shifting our memory, and that people are retaining less information here because we now also have external brains as well. You know, like most people 25 years ago, everybody that's with us right now had anywhere between 10 to 25 phone numbers memorized. If we were to ask them how many phone numbers they have memorized now, we'd get everything from 0 to 3, right? And so it's changing that. It's making us have these compulsive behaviors where we're constantly checking our devices. And again, going back to all the people joining us right now, if they were to turn off their mobile devices for 24 hours, okay? And nobody judge me because I have a couple of them over here. First off, just saying that, some people got anxiety. I could feel it. I could actually feel it. But they would actually hear ghost notifications, right? And so even though it's off, they would still hear it, or they'd still feel the vibrations. So we're having these relationships where all of our precious memories are stored in our phones, right? And we do money transactions and GPS. And so we're codependent and we're becoming one organism with our devices because we constantly have them. Many of us sleep with them. So it's changing how we think. It's changing how we relate to people around us. It's changing our attention spans. It's shifting how we look at the world around us.
Mm, mm. When I was young, I wanted to play pro football. It did not work. I got cut. I tried out for several teams. When you were young, did you want to be a futurist?
I didn't know what a futurist was. No one's going up to little kid. No, how did you find a picture?
Now, when you were that age, were you thinking about becoming a futurist?
That is hilarious. No. So Tiny Crystal wanted to be a teacher, which is because in a way I kind of went to that, right?
Right.
But no, I wanted to be a teacher when I was very small.
When did the shift occur? When did your love of technology and desire to be a strategic consultant, speaker, coach, and futurist, when did that kick in? What contributed to it?
I think it's one of those things where most of us, if we go back and look at time, we'll see little breadcrumbs of who we are now, right? We didn't know then.
Right.
So yes, I wanted to be a teacher. Then I went to wanting to be a lawyer because I'm really good at research. And then from there, I went to wanting to be a psychologist because I like to understand how people work. And now what's funny is I kind of use elements of all these things in what I do now. But the major shift came at a really funny time. I was working in corporate America and I worked in the hospitality industry. That's what my degree is in. And I was talking to my boss one day. I had background in sales. I moved to revenue management because I'm right and left brain. So I like numbers and people. And I remember here I am a millennial, okay, at the time in my early 20s, overseeing a department of people old enough to be my parents and grandparents. I wouldn't even tell them my real age because they would have eaten for lunch. But I'm talking to my boss and there's this new thing on the horizon called social media. And I remember talking to my boss, this older man, and I said, hey, I have a feeling this social media stuff is going to be really big. Could you imagine if companies got on here? Like for the first time in history, you would actually see a brand having a conversation with its customers and consumers. Now, right now, Dr. James, we're like, duh. But at the time, it wasn't a thing. And this man, the older baby boomer man, looked at me and he said, look, kid, you're cute and you make us a bleep load of money. And he didn't say bleep.
Wow.
He said, stick to what you know. I said, okay. So 6 months later, I quit my job, my good paying job, ta-da, and started a marketing firm, a digital marketing firm, because everything in me was compelling me. It said, this is going to be huge. We're seeing a shift. This is going to be a shift in how people do business. And so that was the beginning. And what's interesting is I was a futurist before I knew I was a futurist, because the way that I would see things ahead of time my whole life and kind of prepare for them and try to help other people, I was already using some futurist elements without understanding the processes behind it.
You are Raven. That's so Raven. It's the future. I can see.
And so it started with the marketing firm. And from there, speaking sprung off of that because my clients were members of organizations and they would, ask me to speak and I would do it as a favor, speak at this luncheon or that luncheon until I got too many requests. And then I said, I'm so sorry, one organization, I'm so sorry. I don't have time because it wasn't billable hours for me. And they said, oh, no, but we'll pay you. And I said, oh, and that was the beginning of my speaking. I didn't know that was a thing at the time. And so then that kind of took over, but it was always showing people the future of technology. And then of course I went and I, did courses and stuff on futurism, right? But that's kind of how I got to where I was. It's literally taking what I'd always done. I'd always taken technology, even in high school, and bent it in ways that it wasn't intended to get the type of outcomes I wanted,
So tell me about the courage that went into quitting a perceived guaranteed job, making good money, to starting your own.
So I don't even know if I'd call it courage. I try to be very fair in how I assess things. If I was 30 years old with children, that takes courage, right? 40 years old with medical conditions, that takes courage. What I had was youth. and goofiness. And so I didn't really realize how dangerous what I was doing was. Now, I don't want to discount myself too much. I was a planner my whole life. So much so I remember telling my mom, she was like, you quit your job. And my parents actually, so funny, in school, they didn't have to control my schooling. Like from elementary school, I made straight A's. I picked my classes. I would call them in if it was something that they needed to do. But otherwise, they even let me sign my own report cards because it was straight A's anyways, right?
Wow.
So I'd always plotted. So for me to quit a job was out of character, like that, a good paying corporate job. And I remember my mom saying, what made you? And I said, I heard a voice. She said, are you sure you knew which voice you're hearing? But that was, so it wasn't necessarily courage. It was youth. It was also knowing that, my boyfriend at the time, he said, look, baby, and we weren't living together or anything. We had our own separate bills. And he had actually just quit his job 6 months earlier to start his own business too. And he said, look, baby, he said, you have an amazing track record. You can get hired anywhere based on that. So give yourself some time to try it out. I should also probably mention that boyfriend is now my husband of almost 13 years.
Is that right? Husband, huh?
He's my husband.
I think we got a little picture of that as well. Okay.
Where are you going to find all these pictures?
Crystal, since I do know you, we have talked. Your husband plays a profound role in your life. He is your number one cheerleader. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. From the very beginning, my husband is in many ways a lot of things that I'm not. We have very different talents and abilities. My husband has wisdom. Like just from a young age, he's just extremely wise. And the way that he looks at things, he sees 20 years in the future everywhere he looks, right? And so he thinks that way. So he's wisdom, I'm intuition. And so what's really helped us in our relationship is we realized early on, whenever we had a difference of opinion, and we probably have the most peaceful relationship I've ever heard of in my life. We might have one disagreement every 3 years. And even then it's never heated. Like he's never yelled at me. He's never it's like wonderful, right? Like people don't even believe it until they're around us at our home and they're like, this is amazing. But we learned early on that when it came time to make decisions, even business decisions, we seek each other out for advice. Is this a decision that really is one of wisdom or intuition? Because if this is something that's intuitive, we're going to go with Crystal. If this is something where this might have some long-term implications, we're going to go with CJ. And so even if we don't agree, we kind of look at it and say, which one do we probably need right now? And then depending on which one it is, we go with the person who leads in that way. And so I found it's worked really well for us over the years.
Now you talked about this occurring maybe 13 years ago, 08?
This actually, so we've been married 13 years, but you're talking about when I quit my job and everything? Yeah. That was in 2007.
Beautiful, because we found some amazing pictures of you in 08 that really speaks to your heart and soul at that point.
When I was a baby.
Yeah.
When I was a baby.
Wow, look at those eyes. Piercing. I see wisdom, I see confidence, I see intuition, I see power and strength.
Well, you also see my husband practicing his photography. Like now he's way further, but that was the very beginning of his photography business. So obviously the easiest subject is your girlfriend at the time, right?
Right.
So.
Good stuff. There's a question in the chat room, just for further clarification. It says, for clarity, please describe or define a futurist again. So okay. You can go back to that.
I can do that. I want to start off by saying what it's not. I am not a psychic. Okay. Sometimes people think not a psychic. I don't have a crystal ball somewhere. That's not how this works. A futurist is someone who looks at the horizon, basically everything that's happening around them, and they're looking for signals. Signals are just little pieces of information or data, and they collect it. Now, typically it's about a specific lane. Like I look at the future of technology more for consumer purposes, right? Well, I guess it's possible, but people don't usually look at being a futurist is a generalist thing. You usually have a specific area that you look at because you can't gather the amount of information to be a generalist on everything. So we gather information on a particular thing. Now, a client might hire us and say, hey, we're trying to figure out what we need to do in this one specific area in our business. And so Futurist collects data, they work with the team, and most organizations or individuals, they have a future that they're anticipating in answer to that one area or question. There's something that people are expecting to happen. A futurist job is to look at what are the maybe 2 to 3 alternative futures that are still very likely to happen. And how can we prepare for those as well? So like Shell Oil is probably the first corporation to hire in-house futurists, and it really helped them get through some of the tough times of the 80s, right? When we had some of the oil crises. And so it's basically professionals that look at plans B, C, and D and help you do the same.
How do you attract them? How do you get them to want to look into that future when many organizations are so into the moment? They're in the now, especially considering what has happened with the pandemic.
Well, it's interesting. Right now, they are in survival mode, many of them, but they're very curious about the future. So, because no one knows what's coming, right? Or the way that we used to predict doesn't work anymore. It's broken. Many of our systems are broken. So it's very attractive right now. But in general, I know this is not the answer that anyone's probably expecting, but I'm just going to be very honest. I usually don't try to convince people that they need something, especially when it comes to my business and my offerings. I prefer to be an Amazon so that when people know that they need a vacuum cleaner, they come to me. Now it's just a matter of, oh, you need a vacuum? Here's an assortment to choose from. I do not want to be a Kirby vacuum cleaner salesperson trying to convince people that they need a vacuum in the first place. And so when people already know they have a need, hey, we're not sure what's coming next, or we're having people that are having a hard time adapting to change, or what's next in technology. Now, oh, here are some topics, here are some options, here are some ways I can help you. Or if it's too like micro specific, like maybe they need a data scientist or somebody with something very specific. Okay, here's a Kirby vacuum, not a Kirby, here's a vacuum cleaner of a different color, shape, or whatever from one of my associates that'll work. So I don't really try to convince people in general. I need them to already have an idea that there's a missing puzzle piece, a problem, something that needs to be filled. And then I like to present them with opportunities.
I think with that mindset played a role in you not experiencing what many of us in our industry did last March. For many of us, it was almost as if the lights went off. Mm-hmm. People stopped wanting in-person solution providers and speakers. And many of us was woe was me for a minute. Yeah. Victim vocabulary, what am I going to do? But you didn't feel that at all. Can you tell folks how you were able to just smooth sailing, and it's been smooth sailing in spite of this pandemic?
Well, I want to be fair, because again, I always want to be fair. I think sometimes we compare different situations without seeing all the pieces. And I always like to be transparent. So one thing that helped me right off the bat is my topic. I'm talking about technology and futurism. So what did people want to know about last year when they're all going virtual? Technology, and what do we do about the future? Is there a future? Hell. So I had topics that were highly relevant at the time. I think that's a piece of it. Okay. I can't take credit for that. I was already set up. But I think another piece of it is I didn't panic. To be fair, part of that was because I'm married to a man who is a recovering banker. He's a super saver. When I met him, he was living off of like 40% of his income. And so I have been open to learn from him. And so because we've always lived beneath our means, when this hit and we looked at it and we said, ooh, we might not be working for 6 months to a year, because he has a photography business. Same thing as me, right? We're not just going out to events. It wasn't really a thing. And so we were able to look at our finances, call our financial advisor, look at everything. And we said, hey, we'd actually be good. Like year, 2 years, we could actually, do this. And so when the fear was out, and again, one more time being fair, we have no children. So let me throw that out there too, okay? So when we didn't have the fear, and I could call up my assistant and say, you know what? If we don't make another nickel this year, I can at least pay you for a year. So you don't have to worry about anything.
Nice.
So when you take the fear off the table, the way that you act is different, because we can't be innovative from a state of fear. And that's not blaming anybody from being scared, because that was a scary time. There's a lot going on. So because I was so relaxed, Regina and I, we just started contacting clients, not for business purposes. I told her, your job is to be a fairy godmother. Just check on them, see if they're okay, because they're stressed out. They're canceling things. They're being sued for contracts. It was nuts. And I said, and if they need a little something that will cheer them up, you have my credit card number, buy them stuff. So we're sending out cookies. There was a client that was saying she was working 18-hour days and her back hurt. We sent her like a back massager for her chair. We were just literally, our job all day long was, how are you doing? And sometimes people just need to vent. And I'm no therapist, so I didn't offer advice, but I just let them talk. And I'd send them little things. And then after a few weeks of that, it was very interesting. And I wasn't looking for anything. And I told Regina, don't mention business. I don't care if they never book with us again. It's not about that. But then I started getting calls and emails saying, hey, Crystal, we're going to do a virtual event. Can you do virtual? I was like, yeah, sure I can. And it wasn't even something I didn't start off like pandering.
Yeah.
And so I just started getting all these calls back to back. Hey, can you do virtual? We're doing virtual. Can you do a keynote? And so there's a lot of experimentation on my end to see what works, what didn't work, like the rest of our industry. But I think the combination of me having a topic that's in demand, paired with the fact that I didn't have the stress level that inhibits how we move, so it allowed me to kind of see things a little differently, it worked out well for me.
That's amazing. Amazing. I want you to talk a little bit about Crystal, the speaker.
Okay.
And before you jump into that, we're going to show a little clip of you talking about the BombBomb, one of the tools that can be used today and in the future. Let's take a look at that clip.
Cool thing about BombBomb and some of the other tools is you can actually track and see when they open things. So I send it over, and I see they're all clicking on. I get little updates on the side. I can see when people click on things. But sometimes I'll see that they click on this same email. Maybe we've done business together, but I notice, hey, they just reopened this email a year later. It pops up in my little emails. I just see they opened this from a year ago. So what do? I find an excuse to contact them. I'm like, I just saw this article and it made me think of you, Tiffany.
Please describe Crystal, the speaker, because your stage presence is amazing.
Thank you. It's taken me a while to develop on stage into the presence that I am now. And it's so interesting. My mentor, Karen McCullough, told me in the very beginning, and she's an amazing humorous speaker. It's going to take you a while to figure out who you are, because speakers, and it's not even a speaker thing, but in this case, we're talking about speakers, tend to model ourselves after others. We see who else is successful and then we try to emulate it. And so, trying to figure out where you belong in all of this can be a little bit of an exercise. For me, I think a couple things have been key. One, over time, I've become more me. So the person you see on stage cracking all these jokes, my friends that hang out around me will tell you I am absolutely insane. Okay.
What has contributed to that on stage? Were you being more, since I've done all this research on authenticity, you're being more of you. What contributed to it?
I just noticed that I got laughs, not with the planned content, but when I think of something funny and just say it. Or, I remember the beginning when I was doing, like after dinner talks more often, and people have been drinking, in some of these industries, and you had hecklers. And I love hecklers because I'm really quick on my toes, and I can find a way to turn it on people and make the room laugh at them, not in a mean way, but I'm like, bring it on, let's do it, And so it was just really over time seeing, people respond better to when I am who I am. That's one piece. The next piece is, and this is going to fly in the face of what most other speakers and people in other industries do. As a rule of thumb, I don't really watch other speakers. I won't say never, like if there's a reason to look at someone's talk, I will, or if I'm at a convention and there's a speaker, I'll watch them. But some speakers study others' videos just like they do in sports. When you watch the footage of your opponents, I don't do that because I don't want to pick up anybody's mannerisms. And the last part, which is probably the strangest part, and this is something I do, I don't know anyone else that does this, I watch a lot of stand-up. So I think that's also part of why some of my energy is the way it is. And not even just American stand-up. I actually like to watch a lot of stand-up from other countries. And sometimes not in English, where I have to watch subtitles so that I can see their gestures and what even gets responses in other countries. And I think it's helped me because as I speak around the globe, you have to be culturally competent with your humor, number one, no matter how funny you think you are.
Yep.
But there's some gestures and things that are almost, I say almost, because you gotta be careful, universally humorous to people, right? And so watching stand-up from people around the world, and with all these streaming services now, it's extra easy with Amazon and Netflix and Hulu and all of them. So that's been a big piece of it. So a lot of what people are seeing is probably even that stand-up influence.
I too watch stand-up, and I love stand-up comedians are amazing, and they're super smart in their timing and their pace. So we have that in common. And based on my research, I've learned that you are one of the top speakers, international and national, that's out there. It's amazing. Why don't we show this one clip of you in action with the tornado? Let's take a look at this one.
One thing that most people, 99% of people, have no idea about is that you can actually follow a Twitter account from a mobile phone that has no access to the internet, even if you do not have a Twitter account. So, if there's a natural disaster about to strike, let's say that there's a tornado, I guarantee you, let's say there's a tornado coming down in Oklahoma, because it happens a lot, right? I guarantee you, as this tornado is coming down, there is someone who is running away from that tornado, that as they're running, they still find the time.
Love that. The actual running, turning around. I always say when you're speaking, people need to feel your message, see your message, and hear your message.
Yeah.
And certainly to see that there. Good stuff. Modest, humble. Let's go back to the chat room. Let's see. Question: how would you advise us how to control and effectively use technology as opposed to technology controlling and using us? Hopefully it's not too late, but we don't want technology to negatively dominate our lives, our presentations. Thoughts about that one?
First off, that is a brilliant question. A brilliant question. I actually have a slide in one of my presentations where I have an illustrator who created a picture of a human eye, but there's the on switch in the middle of it. And I'm like, this is what we're trying to avoid, people. And so I think there's a few things that we can do. Number one, when it comes to implementing technology, we kind of have to tune out the noise, because what happens is, and I say this as a millennial, now I'm an old millennial, I'm one of those born millennials that has a mortgage and a husband, but I'm still a millennial, right? And so my generation specifically, even more so than the generation after me, which is a little bit more practical, we tend to have a little bit more shiny button syndrome. And so we have to tune out our friends that are telling us about what's new, because what's new doesn't mean that it has utility for you. And so whether we're talking about as individuals or a company, I'm a big fan of see where there is a need, kind of similar to what I was talking about with the vacuum situation, but do it for yourself. If there is a way, or if there's an area where things keep falling apart, or where, we need to tighten this up, or this isn't efficient or effective, then you find technology to address that. You do not take brand new technology that's out and then try to figure out how to incorporate it into your life. If you have to figure out how to incorporate something, you don't actually need it. It's an expense, not only financially, but also psychologically as well. The other thing we have to do is we have to take technology breaks. So every year I take about a month off from social media. That's actually going to start pretty soon for me. And I don't miss it. It's crazy. As much as I do want it, I don't. Now, I haven't done this in a while because it hasn't been safe during COVID, but my favorite place to vacation is the middle of the Amazon rainforest. And so when I'm there, I'm hanging out with the people that live there. There's no running water or electricity in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. It's me, some tarantulas, some pink dolphins, some snakes, and berries, because I'm a vegetarian, so that's what I have. And it's great because I can't get on any technology. At this point, this isn't even a paperweight because there's no paper, but it's just there. Maybe I could throw it at a snake if I wanted to. That's about all this is going to help me with, right? So I think finding time in your own way to unplug is extremely important, because creativity lives when we unplug from all the outside noise. And, these are a big piece of how that outside noise gets to us. So it's intentional. I think with our children, we have to be intentional. I have a nephew that has spent a lot of time with me before COVID. He's now 10, but before COVID, he would spend one night a week with me overnight since he was 2 weeks old. Okay. So he spent a lot of time with me. And when he's at my house, we don't watch a bunch of TV. We don't do a whole bunch of technology. My family thought that was bizarre at first. They were like, how is this? You're the technology person. I said, I'm bringing him balance because I know how overexposed he is in other places. So he doesn't need to be on the tablet. We're going to the museum. We're going to the park. We're going to Puerto Rico. That's his favorite place to vacation. When he was 5, he's like, Titi, I want to go to Puerto Rico. I don't know who told the 5-year-old about Puerto Rico, but we went. So it's intentional. At the end of the day, we can choose it. We have to cut off certain technologies for different pieces of time, depending on what's appropriate for us, right? We're all different in different situations. And we might even have to draw boundaries with other people around it. because people that are more connected than we are will try to shame us.
Tell us, being intentional, talk to us about social media platforms and which one we should be using for what.
Ooh.
Like sometimes people use LinkedIn with family photos. And I believe you espouse to use LinkedIn for business.
Only business.
So
That's the culture.
Can you speak to being intentional around the social media platforms so that folks who are entrepreneurs or even businesses out there, they can adhere to the advice you're about to offer?
Sure. So each social network has a culture. When you have a message that you're delivering in the real world, right? We might have to change up that message if you're trying to deliver it to people of two different cultures, because they might speak two different language. So to give an example, you might have the same message you need to deliver, but you're going to have to change it if you're talking to someone who speaks English and someone else who only speaks Spanish, right? And so social networks are the same way. There's a culture for each social network. There's language that you speak. LinkedIn is business. It's all business. They don't want to see pictures of our babies or pictures of our cats or videos of our babies riding our cats on it. It's business. Facebook is really about community. It's the one that's the most like the real world, but it really, when you see a lot of the posts that get traction outside of the ones that negatively attach to our emotions and cause that serotonin and dopamine, it's about we. Look at what we're doing. Look what they're doing. How can we support this? Those are the ones that get traction that are positive. Twitter is all about real-time information and adding value. And so if you're trying to get any type of publicity, any type of media coverage, that's the number one place to go to get it, or to get late breaking news. YouTube that's kind of an information, but YouTube has a culture, but it's a little bit of everything. It's just more important to know that that's the second largest search engine owned by the largest, right? TikTok is a video-based social network that is really geared more towards Gen Zs. And it's light for the most part, although there's some messaging, and you can use it for political purposes as well. You can be savvy with it. Instagram is a picture-based social network. It's all about visual storytelling, and that's more popular with millennials. Last one I'll give you, and there's many, but the last one I'll go into is Clubhouse. Is an audio-based social network. The culture of that one is shifting. It's still finding its voice, almost like a baby. You know, when you have, and I say this as someone without children, so I observe them in a different way than parents. But, you know, babies come here typically looking like aliens, and their faces don't settle for a few years. Like, you can't tell where they're going to sit, most babies. And so Clubhouse is the same way. It's so new because it came out last year. It started off as being a place for tastemakers and experts. Now it's still there, but you're having this shift where it's that plus salesy people, plus Jerry Springer. But you can get some amazing insights there. You know, I go to Clubhouse now. I don't go as much as I used to, but I'll tell you some of the most interesting conversations that I've listened to. I've spoken at some too, but on that audio social network, I remember being in a room where people of Yoruba descent, so that's one of the tribes in Nigeria, were talking about colorism. I didn't have anything to add to that conversation, although there's colorism in African-American culture. But where else in the world can you go and listen to that conversation? Or I was listening to a conversation at one point about Asian Americans and some of their internal issues. And they allowed me to be in the room. They were very welcoming, but I was quiet because this wasn't my place to speak, and just listening and learning. And I've been in rooms where everyone in the room had sold businesses for $10 million and up, and they were talking about their tactics. So Clubhouse is great for speaking, which is where a lot of people go, but man, you can be a fly on the wall. So I say all this to say, you asked me about the different social networks. Look where you have a need first. We're going to keep going back to that, where there's that missing puzzle piece, and then use the social network that fits that purpose is aligned with that, and that attracts the target demographic that you're interested in. If you're on Twitter, based on everything that I've said, and you're not there for real-time information adding value, guess what? It's time to get off Twitter. It's not a good use of your time.
Where does your calm come from? When I saw you the first time, I felt the power, the humor, but there was a level of calm, at ease. I'm not sweating. I'm being successful, but
Right.
I'm not being someone else. You talked about that earlier, but
Right.
I've always felt a rich degree of calmness when I'm around you, when I'm watching you, when we talk.
Trauma So I think this is going to sound like a joke, but it's actually not. It's funny. I was talking to a few friends about this last year, and they're like, "You're so calm through all of this." And people have seen me in situations like I live in Houston, Texas. So to give you an idea of how I work, I'm probably the best person to have around when something horrible is happening, because I just kind of go into functioning mode. So like here, when we had Hurricane Harvey, there was a point where the water was rising and it was coming into my garage. And so I'm looking into my garage and I'm looking at me and my husband's dream cars. And I realized I felt nothing. I was like, ah. And so I went into my husband and I said, hey, looks like we might get flooded out on the first floor. Let me take a few pictures of the cars and let's just pull all your electronics to the second floor. And I was real calm on purpose so that he would be calm. And he said, oh, okay. Because you can give people will reflect the energy you give them, right? That's very intentional. Earlier this year, hilarious. I think it was like January 4th. I wake up to sirens outside, and I open my eyes, and my husband's at the window, and he's like captivated like this. There's apartments they're building across the street from my house. They had caught on fire. They're massive apartments. So it looked like the gates of Hades had opened up across the street. I've never seen anything like it since. And I've seen some pretty crazy things. And you could feel the heat, right? At the window. And so I'm looking at my husband who's fixated. And I said, hey. And he said, huh? I said, this is the first thing I said to him. Mind you, I said, hey. I said, I'm sure it'll be fine because there's fire trucks out there. I said, but let's just grab a few important things out of the house and put them in the trunk of our car. And I said it just like that. And he said, oh, okay. I said, all right, let's go. Didn't run or anything. I grabbed 3 backpacks. That's literally all I needed out of our home. I put the things I needed in 3 backpacks, the photo albums, the things that are irreplaceable, stuff that, hard drives, put them in the car. And I went and I knocked on neighbors' doors because it was like some crazy hour. And I said, hey, there's a fire across the street. And I'm talking like, so I don't want to panic people. So, and like, oh, and they're looking out and they're like, oh, do you think it's a problem? I said, well, and I looked up and I showed them, I said, well, it's kind of raining I forgot what it's called, but the ashes, you see like fiery ash. Yeah. I said, it's kind of raining ashes over us right now. So our houses could technically, so maybe just grab the baby's things. Just put them in the trunk just in case. I'm sure it'll be fine. Knock on the next door. So I've had a lot of trauma growing up. And I think that people that have had a lot of trauma, you react in different ways. Some people, they become like hyper with it. And then others, you can't shock me. Like I'm, again, like family and friends crack up laughing at this point. Whatever happens, I'm always like, all right. So trauma, not the answer you were looking for, but the truth.
That is awesome. That's awesome. I'm gonna go back to the chat room. It says, thank you for the nugget of watching stand-up to improve stage delivery. I guess my rendition of Eddie Murphy Delirious might not be suitable for all audiences, but I think there could be some lessons learned.
What's funny? I remember as a kid, my stepdad let me watch Delirious. I think I was like 4 or 5, maybe it's even 6. I remember my mom came home and when he let me watch, he was like, don't tell your mom. And I was like, okay. And so when she came home from work, I did a totally inappropriate joke from her. So yeah, I wouldn't suggest it. If your audiences are anything like my mom, looking at her 6-year-old quoting Eddie Murphy, you don't want to do it.
But think about when he did the ice cream cone. I got ice cream. I got ice cream. You can't have none because your mom on welfare. The key to that for me is that he had nothing in his hand.
Yeah.
He had no visual aids, but because he relived it, used the repetition, the gestures were so elaborate, you really got to sense that he had an ice cream cone and it fell. And he picked it up and kissed it up to God. And we saw that without slides.
Yeah.
Crystal, tell I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's interesting though? I take a very different approach to storytelling because I don't consider myself a good storyteller, even though I'm told often that I'm a good storyteller. What I find is the more, this is your word, authentic I am, especially in reliving experiences or imagining them, my body just falls into place, right? And so for me, I know people that they study it and they're like, do this, then this, then this. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way. I'm just sharing my way. I don't do that. I just try to live and imagine. And I find that when I do that, it comes across as authentic.
Well, this is going to be great then, because you are the queen of calm. We're about to go into the hot seat. So we'll see how the Queen of Calm handles the hot seat.
Oh.
And what the hot seat is, I'm going to give you a word.
Mhm.
And I'd like for you to share the first word that comes to your mind.
Mhm.
This is a talk to think rather than a think to talk.
Okay.
And I'll go through 8 to 10 words and don't start thinking. Just bam, bam. First word comes to mind.
All directions.
Well, we'll get some people on here to, not sure. That's not the assignment. Here we go. Your first word is technology,
Yes.
social media,
Less.
pandemic,
Blessing.
trust,
Imperative.
travel,
Love it. That's 2 words. Sorry.
balance,
Necessary.
the future,
Bright.
companionship,
Needed.
authenticity,
Must.
Crystal Washington.
Peace.
You're off the hot seat. You're right. You're right. Crystal, people want to reach you to get more of this in your heart and just what you bring to organizations, what you bring to entrepreneurs, what you bring to individual clients. How can they reach you? What's the best way?
My website is crystalwashington.com. Crystal spelled like a rock crystal. Washington spelled the only way I know how. .com. And through there, they can email me. They can find links to social media, all kinds of stuff.
You have a clip where you talk about, are we sleeping with our technology? I want to show that real quick, give people a sense again of your humor, but also the power of your voice. Let's take a look.
How many of you in here sleep with your mobile phone? I want you to notice what happened. When I asked that question, you heard whispering all over the room. And someone said something like, what does she mean? In the bed, by the bed, on the floor?
I love it. I love the presence where you held it, showed it. You didn't rush to the line. You let them sit in that moment. Good stuff.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Tell us about your 2 books.
Okay.
Tell us about the highlights. I believe One Tech Action and the Social Media Why.
The Social Media Why was my first book, and One Tech Action is my second. Social Media Why was a book that was designed to help people understand how to use social media for business if they were non-techies. One Tech Action was designed to help people understand how to use the technology that they're walking around with in their pocket and their phone to make them more efficient, effective, connected if they're not techies. You know, Dr. James, my intention was never to be an author. I actually fought writing these books. But what happened was I kept having audience members saying, Crystal, do you know a book that can explain to me, you know, a little bit more in detail of what you're talking about with social media, how to use it for business or how to use it to get a job? And I'm not technical, so I need something really simple to understand. And I couldn't think of anything. And so after a couple years of that, I was like, fine, I'll write it. Because there are plenty of great books that I read on the topic that were amazing, but they were written for techies, right? And so that's why I wrote the 2 books that I did, because a lot of my audience members are not highly techie. That's why I'm brought in. I'm like a technology translator. And I intentionally don't use much jargon because I want people to feel comfortable. And so that's really why those books were written. So if someone's advanced with technology, those books are not for them. Even if they're, you know, middle of the road, to still not. But for people that are wanting to stay ahead, and they're brilliant people, they just might not be technically inclined, or they may not have the self-esteem around that technology. They may not know that they can do it yet. So that's who those books were written for.
That's beautiful, beautiful. As the technology whisperer, please talk to our folks about technology not replacing phone calls or notes or those subtle things that we do to communicate and show people we care.
Well, because it does not by any stretch of the imagination. Anybody that lived through the pandemic knows that face-to-face is important. I found myself craving little things. Like I remember I wasn't missing the big stuff. I remember my dad calling me at one point and he said, you and CJ, that's my husband. He said, you guys are really on the extreme end of this social distancing. And by extreme, he means one, we live in Texas. Okay. So just to follow directions is extreme here. But we actually were following all the guidelines with the masking, with not having people up. Like we were doing everything we're supposed to do. And I told him, I said, I've been preparing for this my whole life. And he said, what? I said, no, seriously. I said, do you remember when I was a kid and I didn't really like to play with other little kids? And I said, remember how you used to threaten to spank me, to make me go outside? And I just wanted to stay inside. He said, yes. I said, well, bam, here I am inside. And he was like, this is ridiculous. So with that having been said, I completely lost the question. Can you remind me? I was going somewhere. It just jumped.
The notion that technology should not replace calls.
Oh. But after a period of time, I was enjoying being locked in the house because, again, that's actually, I'm happy that way from childhood, as I was saying. But I started noticing I was craving little things like sitting outside and having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee with a friend with the breeze blowing on my face. Just little things that I took for granted, small sensual things, especially those relationships. I miss touching people for the period of time where they didn't know how this was spread. I remember seeing that nephew and going to see him. And I remember his little eyes tearing up because he wanted to hug me, but we couldn't hug. And so I, played badminton with, we figure out other things we could do. It was hard, so we all learned how important actual human interaction is, right? And so we need face-to-face. And I'm not saying people shouldn't listen to any type of health related guidelines. I'm just saying it's important. Phone calls, hearing someone's voice, that's very different than someone responding on social media. We know it's different because that's why so many misunderstandings happen on social media. If you pick up the phone, you don't have that. I had an email from a client earlier today, and I realized my response, while it wasn't rude at all, could have been read that way. And so I just picked up the phone. And by the end of the call, she said, I'm so glad you called. Thank you so much. She was happy.
Yeah.
Handwritten notes. Those became extra important, especially during the pandemic. Anyone that got handwritten notes or just little things to say, I'm thinking about you or I love you, meant so much more. Technology allows us to connect with people in between those other types of connections.
Good.
It's not appropriate to call our clients, well, most of us, there's some exceptions. For many of us, it's not appropriate to call our clients every single day. It's not appropriate for us to show up to their office every day and say, hey, I was just thinking of you. Because then we're a stalker and that's not good. But what we can do is if we're connected on social media and they post something about their grandkids, we can make a little comment about how cute their ugly how cute their cute grandkids are, right? Or whatever. So it allows us to forge relationships in between those other interactions. It allows us to get electronic nudges to do those other forms of connections. It does not replace those forms of connection.
Speaking of replacing in little things, you talk a lot about the significance of the words we use in our technology, our website or search engines, keywords. Can you speak to the power of those?
Yeah, are we talking about SEO?
Yes.
Okay, so when it comes to search engine optimization, which is basically making sure that your online assets are likely to be picked up by search engines like Google, it's exceedingly important. I think one of the funniest examples or best examples I have personally was years ago. I got a call from a large oil and gas company, and they were having a global meeting in Houston, Texas, where I live. Somebody, some hot shop at the top of the food chain, decided at the last minute, 2 weeks before the event, that they needed to have an after dinner speaker. Remember, this is the beginning. I was always speaking to drunk people. I don't know why that happened.
I was getting ready to say crystal against alcohol. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting. So anywho, when she called me about the event and it was 2 weeks out, I asked, okay, well, this is great, but how did you hear about me? And she said, well, I knew that I needed to find someone in Houston because this is so last minute. And this event. She said, so I just Googled Houston social media speaker. I said, do you mind sending me a screenshot of what you see? Because we don't all see the same things in Google.
Right.
Send me her screenshot. When she put in Houston social media speaker, not Crystal, Washington. First thing that popped up was my website. Second thing that popped up was my LinkedIn profile. Third and fourth thing that popped up were two of my YouTube videos. At that point, my job was just not to stink on those 2 YouTube. So that's how I got that piece of business. And so they weren't searching for my name. They were listening. They were looking for keywords. And I've gotten pieces of business in Accra, Ghana that way, in Dusseldorf, Germany that way. You'd be surprised. So it is important that we're intentional with the words that we use for search engine optimization. It's also important that we are careful about the words that we use when it comes to call to action. We want to make sure that people know where we're trying to direct them.
And I love that you mentioned some of the places where you got work. And just doing my research, I see Greece, Ecuador, Peru, Maui, Rome, Istanbul, the Bahamas, Paris, Trinidad and Tobago, Germany. What? You frequent flyer, you.
I've had some great experiences. It's a blessing to be able to be around people of so many different backgrounds, and you learn so much. You know, Dr. James, I think one of the funniest ones was I had a group out of the Middle East contact me, and we had our initial call, you know, planning call. They said, hey, and this was years ago. They said, we looked at your videos and you're great. We noticed you always wear long sleeves and pants. I said, yes. He said, well, you can wear a skirt if you want, or you want to wear short sleeves or even sleeveless. And I'm like, huh? And like, we noticed sometimes you wrap your hair. I said, yeah, you don't have to wrap your hair. And I found myself thinking, is this Middle Eastern client telling me I'm too conservative for the Middle East? You learn things. You learn things.
I just want folks to know how big you are, the things you're doing, the fact that you took that leap and you're traveling, doing what you love to do, where many of us are in jobs without joy.
Mhm.
We're doing the 9 to 5, the 8 to late, and now since we're doing everything virtually, many of us, there's 6-day work weeks or 7.5-day work weeks. So you sharing what you're doing and how you're doing and being unapologetically crystal as you're doing it, I think is profound.
Thank you.
And courageous. There is another comment, Q&A. It says, it appears that you're playing big and positively affecting people throughout the world. How would you mentor someone, or what would you say to someone who you think should be playing bigger? What would you say?
Oh, I do it all the time. I plant little seeds. So what's funny is I don't technically mentor people. Like when people come to me and say, will you be my mentor? No, because people define it differently, right? And so I typically am like, well, but I have quite a few people that will tell you that I'm their mentor, and I am. And here's how this works. If anybody needs a mentor, I'm going to tell you how to trick someone in being your mentor, and it works every time. And this is actually kind of how I got Karen too. Ask somebody for a very specific piece of advice in an area that they're an expert in. I'm trying to figure out how to do this, this, and this. I know this is your area. Do you mind telling me, what should I do with this? And be very specific. They're going to give you a specific answer. You go and do what they told you to do, and then report back with your results. Thank you so much for telling me this. I did this, I implemented it, and this is what happened. And they're going to feel so good. Maybe send them a thank you card or something, and then come back later and say, hey, that last advice you gave me was amazing. I'm doing blah, blah, blah. And keep doing it. After a while, you have a mentorship relationship. They're checking on you because you're giving them a gift. Humans almost always want to be able to pass on something to the next generation, or other people, could even be people older than you that are coming in a direction behind you where you can help them. I think most people actually want to help people. So when you're showing people that you are fertile soil and that, you know, the crop will grow where you're at, they're more likely to help you. If someone's playing small right now, I would just say, open yourself to the possibilities. I honor everybody. So whether you have your own business and you're happy, you have your own business and you hate it and you want to sell it and you don't know how, whether you're working at a job and you love it, or you're working at a job and you hate it, I honor everybody. But I remember when I was in corporate America and I was very depressed because I worked for a company that paid me very, very well. But I was dealing with sexual harassment. I was dealing with racism. And I mean, this wasn't, you know, stuff in the gray area. Like I could show emails that I still have copies of from that time. No one would say that's anything but racism or inappropriate sexual advances. It can't be interpreted any other way. And I remember working for the hotel. You have something called manager on duty, which is where on the weekends, every different manager has to play at some point the general manager, because the general manager can't work 7 days a week. So as a manager, whatever department, you're locked in the hotel on the weekend, and you are the general manager for your weekend assigned in the month. So I'm locked into the hotel where I worked for. I remember sitting in my room and just thinking about just all the stuff I was dealing with. I loved my work. I loved the people that worked for me, but it was just heavy, all the other stuff. And I thought, if you could do anything you wanted, what would it be? And I pulled out a little piece of scratch paper from the hotel on the tablet. And the first thing I wrote down is, I'd want to have my own business. And then I wrote, I'd want to write a book helping people with their businesses. And the last thing I put was something I never even thought of. I want to speak all over the world. And I tucked it away and I didn't think about it for a while, but I allowed myself just for a moment to think about what was possible. And this is before, you had Rhonda Byrne's book about The Secret and all that kind of, this is before all that.
Yeah.
But I think allowing yourself to see the possibilities is massive. Just allow yourself to believe it's possible first.
I love it. I love it. Listen, imagine being stuck in the airport with somebody. Who would you want that person to be? That was me and Crystal 2 years ago with another one of our colleagues, Vincent, San Diego airport for hours. And we just went back and forth, and looking at the situation and not losing our mind, but getting to know and enjoy each other better. Crystal, one more real quick, because time is getting away. I'm looking at your screen, your picture, the lighting, it's almost like your high definition. Any tips, tools, techniques for getting better lighting when the people are doing Zooms or virtual broadcasts?
For sure. So first of all, do not use internal cameras on your devices. So if you have a laptop, don't do that. If you can afford it, okay, we're going to use whatever we have, but if you can afford it, for about $70, you can get a Logitech HD camera. So that's number one. But the biggest thing you're actually seeing is the lighting. I know that Dr. James mentioned I'm married to a photographer, so I listen to him. And while I have a ring light in front of me, it's not on. I'm facing natural light, and natural light always makes cameras pop. If you know the weather's going to be good. So if there's storms are coming, don't do that, because then you're going to go dark and light during the call. But natural light and a good camera.
I love it. I love it. At the end of each show, we always have our guests, whether they're a speaker or not, give us a 30-second keynote, a call to action, something to finish off the year, something to consider going into 2022. Mic check, mic check. Crystal Washington, the next voice they're going to hear is you doing your mini keynote. Now, I want you to do a little close-up, so come into the camera and speak to the group. Give them something. Tell them something good. Dun, dun.
So you have you have about 31, I think, days left in the year. And there's a lot of pressure to get things done. I would suggest that the best accomplishment that you can have over these next 31 days is not to check a bunch of things off of a list or to add more things to do. One of the biggest gifts you can give yourself is the gift of cleaning house. And so that might be going on that phone and deleting all those apps that suck your energy, that take away your productivity, or that maybe you've been meaning to use. Maybe people have been saying you need to use this app. It's good for this, it's good for that, but you haven't used it yet. And every time you look at it, you just feel guilty. Get rid of it. It's not for you right now. Things around the house you don't need, clothes, extra electronics. You're waiting for that perfect time to give it to this person or that person that you can't get a hold of. Get rid of it. Use this time to clean house. Get rid of as much as you can physically, mental baggage. You might even have to boot some people. That's okay. This way, you're making room for all the blessings that 2022 will bring.
Time to do some cleanup. Clean up, not just straighten up. Clean up. I love that. Crystal, thank you for making the time for the folks at the Dr. James Smith Jr. Show. Really appreciate it. We always say that we're informational and transformational, and you certainly provided that for us today. And for you viewers, next week, we're not going to be on at noon Eastern Standard Time. We'll be on at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're doing a special evening Dr. James Show. Join us then. Bring a friend, bring friends, plural. We'll see you then. Take care. And don't forget, you've just been Gym Packed.